News from the business world. A remarkable comeback for Donald J. Trump, the Big Apple tycoon who enjoyed Midas-like successes in the glitzy 1980s and whose larger-than-life personality was on constant display.
He loves having beautiful women and beautiful cars and beautiful palaces, and he loves being known as the Donald, and he loves being that person.
The breakup between Donald and Ivana was something that had been going on for years, and I think our relationship just happened after that had already lost its track.
For Trump, the beautiful things, the financial success seemed to be lost. His business collapsed at the same time his personal life exploded. But Trump fought his way back in an astonishing comeback.
When you see all this, and then when people come up to you and grab at you and touch you and this and that, did I ever think it was going to be like that? No. In my wildest dreams, I never thought it was going to be like that.
Donald was the middle child of 5, born in 1946 to a pair of romantics. Right after Fred Trump first set his eyes on Mary MacLeod, he had rushed home to tell his mother he'd met the girl with whom he would spend the rest of his life. They married in 1936. With a family quickly growing, Fred Trump began building his fortune by constructing homes in Brooklyn and Queens for GIs returning from World War II. Though the family became quite wealthy, Fred and Mary Trump would insist that their children succeed both at school and at work. Donald Trump would exceed his parents' wildest expectations, following the path paved by his father.
He learned at the feet of a master, and there was always business being discussed in terms of how you build a building, how you get approvals, those types of things.
The learning wasn't just from watching. The Trump children were all required to work starting as teenagers. Though Fred Trump had built a mini empire in Queens, he brought his children up to believe that what they earned was vital to the family. It was Fred Trump's way of teaching them to respect the value of money. The girls worked in banks or in local department stores. The boys worked with their father, doing everything from sanding floors to hauling lumber.
And I watched, and it wasn't that I even watched consciously. I'd be sitting on the floor playing with blocks as a 3-year-old baby, and he'd be on the floor talking to contractors about price and elevators and wood. And, and by the time I'm 16 years old, I sort of knew everything about building buildings, and I never studied, but I knew everything about it.
I think that what Donald got from his father was the disciplines of hard work, and you're not born a builder, you learn to be a builder.
Young Donald Trump was, in fact, not much of a student. He preferred to spend his days playing ball, and it was in this sport that Donald tasted his first success. But like all kids his age, Donald wanted a new baseball mitt. They could easily have afforded one, but Fred Trump said no, on principle.
He came home and he said to my father, Peter blank has a baseball mitt that costs $45. I want one too. And of course, my father's standard answer was, of course you can't have that. You won't appreciate anything when you grow up if you have it now. Of course, he didn't get a $45 baseball mitt.
If young Donald learned that it took hard work to get money for expensive baseball gloves and other luxuries, he wasn't learning much in school. In fact, he'd become more than a handful for his teachers, throwing chalk and erasers at them just to see their reactions. And his troublemaking wasn't confined to the schoolroom. Donald's older brother and sister couldn't wait for their parents to leave the house so they could get even.
But he had a way on occasion of driving you nuts. And one Saturday night, I remember, he was sitting at the dining room table, and there was a bowl of mashed potatoes on the table, and Donald went through one of his, cute little performances like, and my brother Fred picked up the bowl of mashed potatoes and flung them across the table, and Donald had mashed potatoes coming out of his eyes and his nose.
Donald's parents decided what their 13-year-old son needed was more discipline, so they sent him to military school. The instructors at New York Military Academy wouldn't stand for unpolished boots, much less throwing of erasers. One of Donald's first tasks was learning to march.
If he didn't do it right, he had to do 20 push-ups with the rest of them. If he didn't do his manual of arms correctly, he had to double time the perimeter with the rifle.
Trump, nicknamed DT, began to flourish, even excel at the academy. Among his many awards was one for neatness, and he was promoted steadily within his cadet company to commander of the honor guard. In uniform, he led the cadet company in the Columbus Day Parade down Fifth Avenue, past buildings he would one day own. The shrapnel, the yearbook of the New York Military Academy, contained one more notation about DT. It was something that would later seem quite ironic. He was voted ladies' man.
That is the vote by his classmates. Donald Trump was a tall drink of water, I used to call him. Blonde hair, good-looking, clean-cut American kid. And when the girls used to come up on Sundays, why, you know, they would all know who Donald Trump is.
But Donald's biggest love at the time was still baseball. He was captain of the Military Academy team. At the state championship finals, the score was tied 2-2 with 2 out in the final inning. Donald Trump was up next. It would be the most important at-bat of the season.
And this was our last game of the season. And we had a man on third, 2 out. Trump came up to the plate, and he hit a ball to right field. He was a light swing on that one. So the kid scored from third. He went down to first, and he was jumping up and down with joy.
Trump was scouted by the major leagues, but never would be seen on a baseball card. He passed up his chance at pro ball for college, Fordham, and Wharton School of Business. After graduation, everyone expected Donald to join his father's company, but his dreams were not of middle-class developments in Queens. Donald Trump was looking across the East River into the skies of Manhattan at a skyline he would one day change. His first bold move would come as he applied one of his father's lessons, which would become his formula for success. Buy when a property and its owner are in distress, then turn the place around. The diamond in the rough that caught Donald's eye was on the most famous street in New York City, 42nd Street.
I mean, he told me what he had in mind for the Commodore, asked my opinion, and I basically told him he was crazy.
In 1974, at the height of New York City's financial crisis, Trump started talking with the bankrupt Penn Central Railroad about the seedy Commodore Hotel above Grand Central Station. At age 28, when most people would be worrying about buying a house, Trump was pushing a concept that seemed impossible, using a combination of family money, $45 million in loans, and a proposed tax break to finance his first deal.
You were going to sell the city to give up their taxes, to be a partner in a new hotel. You were going to convince the state that they ought to come in also and be part of it. You were going to convince somebody like Hyatt that they ought to put their name on a hotel, which at that time, the Commodore, you have to remember, was closed, and there was a massage parlor on the second floor. And somehow this was going to end up to be an economic success.
The Commodore project's biggest difficulty turned out not to be permits or financing, but the building itself. In addition to its bad reputation, the Commodore had tiny rooms, poor ventilation, and structural problems. This made it doubly tough on Trump. His plan, which he'd reuse in virtually all his development proposals, was to rebuild the Commodore into what he calls a world-class luxury property.
Donald hired the best architects and the best engineers and say, good, don't tell me it can't be done, tell me how it can be done.
It's a classic example of when you're young, sometimes you're not smart enough to know that something can't be done. And Donald never for a second thought it couldn't be done. And he made it happen.
The Commodore project, which sparked a turnaround in Midtown New York City, also led to Trump meeting the first of 2 women who would become key factors in his early life. Norma Ferderer was hired as Trump's personal assistant.
He's tough. He is tough, and he's demanding. But you know what? You don't think of it on a day-to-day issue because he is so effective on what he's doing, and you understand what he's doing, and you want to be a part of it.
Trump would meet the other woman, a model who lived in Canada, when he went to watch the Olympics in Montreal. Ivana Winkelmeyer-Zilnikova was her name. She was 3 years younger than he and had been an alternate on the Czechoslovakian ski team in 1972. In 1977, 1 year after they met, she and Trump would marry and become partners in business as well as at home.
And when we got married, I came from Montreal. Then I used to work as a model for 10 years, and I got pregnant. I know the people. I was bored, And Donald put me into the construction of the building and then into the designing. And I got involved very, very much, and I enjoyed those years.
The Trumps would have 3 children, Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric. And for years, they would lead the kind of life of which most can only dream. As the Trump empire grew,
We started young couple, like maybe not like everybody else, because Donald wasn't from the poor family. But Donald started 10 years ago with almost nothing, and he really built a billion-dollar empire, and I'm very proud of him.
in 1981, Trump formally established the Trump Organization, an umbrella company for his deals. Just 1 year later, a skyscraper would rise on Fifth Avenue with a dazzling pink marble atrium and 2-foot-high gold letters announcing the arrival of a new real estate mogul. The building was called Trump Tower, and with the 80s boom in full swing, Donald Trump was on his way. First, there was the Trump Tower. The Trump Plaza, a $125 million residential tower, would soon rise a few blocks away. The success of these projects left Donald Trump with a sizable fortune. He and Ivana soon began a string of acquisitions that dazzled and amazed even the most jaded. They'd add to their list of homes Mar-a-Lago, the legendary 118-room Palm Beach estate built in the 1920s by the post-serial family. The Trumps bought it from the federal government for $5 million in 1985, knowing it had $1 million a year maintenance bill. There was the Trump Princess, acquired that same year for $30 million. But the Trumps' first new purchase was a $3.7 million mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, even though the Trumps planned to live in New York City, in a 50-room, $10 million apartment they'd carved out of the top 3 floors of the Trump Tower. The things Trump bought were all unique, like his construction projects. Still, the most astonishing thing about Trump's new buildings wasn't that they stood out so much from the rest of the architecture in Manhattan. It was the prices he was asking for the apartments in his towers, all of which bore his name.
If you get a building with Trump's name on it, you will get more per square foot.